Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Billy James Hargis, and it has been a great honor has been given to me to introduce our next speaker. It is not difficult for me to introduce this man because I know of no man on the American scene today that I have greater reverence for, greater respect for than our next speaker. Our next speaker this afternoon is a man who has distinguished himself as an American. Just a few moments ago, Tom Anderson and I were talking about our speaker, and he said, you know, in my opinion, and I consider Mr. Anderson an expert in this field, he said, in my opinion, Ezra Taft Benson is the greatest Secretary of Agriculture the United States ever had, and I think we can all voice that opinion. Mr. Benson is my idea of what a conservative patriot ought to be. He's a man high in spiritual ideals. He's a man high in his love and devotion to this country. And he's a man that goes on unaffected by all of the smears and unfortunate publicity from the misguided who do not understand the motivations of a sincere patriot. He's a great patriot. As you know, he served while President Dwight David Eisenhower was in the White House as Secretary of Agriculture, did a tremendous job. He weathered many battles. Even his enemies believed that he was a man of tremendous stature and a man of tremendous ideals. This man wouldn't sell for anyone. I've met very few people in my life that I feel have no price on their heads, that couldn't be bought for anything, and I think this man couldn't be bought. I know he couldn't be bought. Here's a man that couldn't be bought at any price. He's a member of the Council of 12 of the great church in Salt Lake City, the Mormon Church. This morning he visited their local affiliate here in Boston. He's a great Christian, a man of faith, a man of tremendous personal character. He's a patriot. What can you say about a man like Ezra Taft Benson except he's perhaps one of the greatest living Americans? And I think we should give a rousing welcome to this great citizen, Mr. Ezra Taft Benson of Salt Lake City.
Dr. Hargis, my fellow citizens, humbly and gratefully I stand before you this Sabbath day and acknowledge the rich blessings which are mine as an American citizen. I always love the Sabbath day, and today I have had the privilege of enjoying 3 of our great freedoms at least. I read my newspaper this morning. We have a free press in this country to a very great extent. I went to church and had the opportunity of worshiping and speaking without any fear whatever. And I come here to this meeting, this public meeting of American citizens, to speak my mind fearlessly, unafraid. I have been in many parts of the world where people do not have this blessed privilege, where they have lost that which is dearer than life itself, their freedom, a God-given right to man. I hope that this afternoon what I say will be appropriate and helpful. I do appreciate the kind words of my good friend, Dr. Hargis. I hope that I can live to more fully merit the good things that he has said. Now, this afternoon I speak to you as a fellow citizen of the United States of America, deeply concerned with the welfare of our beloved country. We are in the midst of continuing international crisis. The outlook for world peace and security seems dark indeed. The gravity of the world situation is increasing almost daily. The United Nations is unable to settle the troubles of the world. In truth, we are faced with a hard fact that the United Nations seems to have largely failed in its purpose. Yes, the days ahead are sobering and challenging. All over the world, the light of freedom is being diminished. Across whole continents of the earth, freedom is being totally obliterated. Never in recorded history has any movement spread its power so far and so fast as has socialistic communism in the last 3 decades. The facts are not pleasant to review. Communist leaders are jubilant with their success. They are driving freedom back on almost every front. It is time, therefore, that every American become informed about the aims, tactics, and schemes of socialistic communism, which is essentially a war against God, and the plan of salvation, which is based on freedom of choice. The fight against godless communism is a very real part of every man's duty. It is the fight against slavery, immorality, atheism, terrorism, cruelty, barbarism, deceit, and the destruction of human life through a kind of tyranny unsurpassed by anything in human history. Here is a struggle against the evil, satanical priestcraft of Lucifer. 3 years ago, a beloved spiritual leader delivered an inspiring prayer at the dedication of a temple near London, England. As an introduction to what I trust you will be pleased to have me say on this important occasion, I quote a short paragraph from that memorable prayer. Next to life, we express gratitude for the gift of free agency. When thou didst create man, thou placed within him part of thine omnipotence and bade him choose for himself. Liberty and conscience thus became a sacred part of human nature. Freedom not only to think, but to speak and act is a God-given privilege, unquote. Our heritage of freedom is as precious as life itself. It is truly a God-given gift to man. Since the time of the council in heaven, and it is my faith we were all there, the fight of liberty-loving people for freedom has continued. Free agency is an eternal principle vouchsafed to us in the perfect law of liberty, the gospel of Jesus Christ. Freedom of choice is more to be treasured than any earthly possession. As a U.S. citizen, I believe it is guaranteed in our heaven-inspired Constitution. Yes, freedom is an inherited, inalienable, divine gift to man. When the Savior of mankind wished to impress on his hearers the fruits of his teaching, he used these words: "The truth shall make you free." We are moral agents with freedom to choose between right and wrong. Past material advances have been the fruit of our freedom, our free enterprise capitalistic system, our American way of life, our God-given freedom of choice. Progress of the future must stem from this same basic freedom. Because our forefathers, yours and mine, fought for the ideal of freedom, because our fathers preserved that ideal through our free competitive enterprise system under our God-given free agency, because they were willing to make religion a vital force in daily living, all of us have climbed through the years to new heights of well-being and inner strength. But it is not only in the moral choice of right and wrong that man is free. Among the relentless quests of human history is the quest for political freedom. When the American patriot, Patrick Henry, who would be labeled an extremist today, shouted his immortal, "Give me liberty or give me death," he did not speak idly. when at Philadelphia in 1776 the signers of the Declaration of Independence affixed their signatures to that sacred document, they, in a very real sense, were choosing liberty or death. Not one of them but knew full well that if the revolution failed, if the fight for freedom should come to naught, they would be branded as rebels and hanged as traitors. The inspired founding fathers formulated a system of government with checks and balances protecting the freedom of the people. But even this was not enough. The first order of the new Congress was to draw up a Bill of Rights, 10 amendments guaranteeing for all time the fundamental freedoms that the American people insist are theirs by the will of God and not by the will of government. Yes, the founders of our country bequeathed to us a heritage of freedom and unity that is our most priceless political possession. But to be enjoyed, freedom must be won continually. The major responsibility of government is to guard the lives and safeguard the freedom of its citizens. Yet even in the operation of government, especially big government, there are real dangers to our freedom. Today, the scope and variety of governmental operations has become amazingly wide. We are touched by government from before we are born until after we die. Government impinges on our lives every hour of the day and night. Yet while most of these governmental activities appear helpful in greater or lesser degree, we must face the central problem of just how much of our lives, of our freedom, of our economy, and of our society we want to entrust to government. And we must face the further fact of just what division of function we in the United States want to make between Washington and our state capitals. We must be aware of the price we pay when we place more and more of our lives in the hands of centralized government. We must realize that this trend, what these changes toward centralized power in government are doing to our free institutions. Is there indeed any characteristic of the American people which is more abiding than a distaste for being run from Washington? Before we embark on such programs of federal aid for an ever-widening range of social and economic services, assuming these services are needed and wanted, we should ask ourselves these questions. First, can the federal government perform these services more efficiently than private enterprise or states or local communities? Government inherently is inefficient because there is no profit motive, there is no competition, which is the very life of business and free enterprise. Secondly, we should ask, what would be the effect on our free institutions if this particular service is performed by the central government? Third, what would be the effect on the morale and character of the people? After all, the supreme test of any policy or program is this: how will it affect the morale and the character of the people? If the honest and careful considered answers to these questions point to the launching of federal programs, then these programs can be of service. If, however, these proposed programs contemplate a high degree of federal financing and decision-making, if they spring from collectivist thinking, if they expose themselves to partisan politics, if they weaken the morale and the character of our people, then on the basis of the record, their prospects are not good. Character is the one thing we make in this world and take with us into the next. The historian Glover of Oxford University makes this cryptic comment: "It is better for the development of character and contentment to do certain things badly yourself than to have them done better for you by someone else. It is high time we recognize and realize the dangerous threat of creeping socialism and its ruthless comrade, atheistic communism. When socialism is understood, we will realize that many programs advocated, and some of those already adopted in the United States, fall clearly within the category of socialism. What is socialism? It is simply governmental ownership and management of the essential means for the production and distribution of goods. For 30 years, in our beloved country, we have aided the cause of atheistic socialistic communism by permitting socialistic communists in high places in government, by giving away vital military secrets, by squandering much of our material resources, by recklessly spending ourselves to near bankruptcy, by weakening our free enterprise system through adoption of socialistic policies, by wasteful bungling of our foreign affairs, by ever-increasing confiscatory taxation, and by permitting the insidious infiltration of socialistic communist agents and sympathizers into almost every segment of American life. Our freedoms were not achieved, and they cannot be maintained by simple shortcuts that attempt to bypass basic, eternal truths. We cannot, we must not ignore sound basic economic principles. These economic laws are immutable, just as much so as the moral laws, the laws of nature, the Ten Commandments. When will we learn that the laws of economics are immutable? Senator Harry F. Byrd said way back on May 1st, 1962, the administration has indicated that it will ask for another increase in the statutory debt limit. This increase to be in the amount of $8 billion. Such an increase would raise the limit to $308 billion. If it should be requested and granted by July 1st, 1962, and of course you know it was granted, it would be the third time within a year that the limit would be raised by a total of $15 billion. Continuing, Senator Byrd says a few words needs to be said about the federal budget. There was a $4 billion deficit last year, 1961, he was referring to. There will be another deficit this year, 1962, which ended July 1st, or June 30th. It is officially estimated at $7 billion. There will be another deficit next year, 1963, and that's the fiscal year we're in now. The fiscal year beginning July 1962. The Budget Bureau is still estimating a normal surplus. At this time, I predict another deficit of $4 to $5 billion. In conversation with Senator Byrd later last fall, he predicted it would exceed $5 billion deficit by the end of this year. I know of no one in this country who has a better grasp of the fiscal situation than Senator Byrd of Virginia. How much longer can we continue to be Santa Claus for the free world, banker for the free world, and policeman for the free world? When will Judgment Day come? We must pay our debts and live within our income if we would preserve our God-given freedom. The paramount issue today is liberty against creeping socialism. But communism and socialism would destroy our economic system and replace it with socialism. John Strachey, a top official in the Labor Socialist Party of Great Britain, in his book entitled The Theory and Practice of Socialism, said this: it is impossible to establish communism as the immediate successor to capitalism. It is accordingly proposed to establish socialism as something which we can put in the place of our present decaying capitalism, unquote. Some timid, vacillating political leaders proclaim that communism is something we will have to learn to live with, whether it is Khrushchev or some other leader. Some of them refer to it as peaceful coexistence. The present communist system, they declare, will continue because there is no alternate system to replace communism. The policy of increasing power, of pushing their system outward and using the Communist Party, they say, will go on. Such a negative attitude writes off the hundreds of millions behind the Iron Curtain as a lost cause. Surely no courageous, liberty-loving citizen will treat the communist secret combination as something we will have to learn to live with. There is a more courageous and sounder point of view. I say to you that men will be free. There is no freedom under socialistic communism. Sooner or later, the people will rise against it. They cannot oppose those fundamentals of civilization and of God. They can't crush their people always. Men will be free. We must ever keep in mind that collectivized socialism is part of the communist strategy. Communism is fundamentally socialism. Communism and socialism, closely related, must be defeated on principle. It is high time we awaken to the dangers of excessive government in business, in education, and in agriculture, as well as other segments of our economy. It is time we realize the perils of too great a concentration of power and too much dependence on public agencies. We must never forget that nations may, and usually do, sow the seeds of their own destruction while enjoying unprecedented prosperity. I agree with Tom Anderson, who said this: as businessmen, you must stand up and be counted, else you'll be counted out. The middle of the road between the extremes of good and evil is evil. When freedom is at stake, your silence is not golden, it's yellow. Why change the American system, which produced the greatest freedom for the greatest number of people in human history, along with the world's highest standard of living, for socialism? Under any name, socialism has been a miserable failure for 1,000 years. A government big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything you've got. The socialistic communist conspiracy to weaken the United States involves attacks on many fronts. To weaken the American free enterprise economy, which outproduced both its enemies and allies during World War II, is a high priority target of the communist leaders. Their press and other propaganda media are therefore constantly selling the principles of centralized or federal control of farms, railroads, electric power, schools, steel, maritime shipping, and many other aspects of the economy, but always in the name of public welfare. We have seen in the past quarter century a tremendous shift from individual to governmental responsibility in many phases of economic and social life. We have seen a rapid shift of responsibility from the states to the federal government. The magnitude of these changes is revealed by a few simple figures. 25 years ago, the federal government received 1/4 of all the taxes collected in the United States. Today, the federal government, in spite of the biggest tax cut in history in 1954, collects not 1/4, but 68% of all our taxes. 25 years ago, all taxes, federal, state, and local, took 14% of our national income. Today, taxes take over 35%. Fighting first a prolonged depression and then a devastating war was used as an excuse to shift undue responsibility to the federal government. The shrinking of time and distance and the growing interdependence of our economic lives have been used as a guise to centralize more authority at the national capital. This has in it real danger. Yet deep in their hearts, the American people instinctively know that great concentration of power is an evil and a dangerous thing. They do not need to have it proved. What lies behind this conviction? Basically, it is an intuitive knowledge that sooner or later, the accumulation of power in a central government leads to loss of freedom. It has always been so. Once power is concentrated, even for helpful purposes, it is all there in one package where it can be grabbed by those who may not be helpful in its use. If power is diffused, this cannot happen. This is why the inspired founders of our country carefully divided power between the state and federal levels. Nothing has happened in the meantime to call in question the validity of this arrangement. Our traditional federal-state relationship, we must never forget, starts with a general presumption in favor of the state and individual rights. Under the constitutional concept, powers not granted to the federal government are reserved to the states or to the people. The framers of our Constitution knew many forces worked toward the concentration of power at the federal level. They knew it somehow seems easier to impose so-called progress on localities than to wait for them to bring it about themselves. Raids on the federal treasury can be all too readily accomplished by an organized few over the feeble protests of an apathetic majority. With more and more activity centered in the federal government, the relationship between the costs and the benefits of government programs becomes obscure. What follows is the voting of public money without having to accept direct responsibility locally for higher taxes. I know of no device of government which will lead more quickly to an increase in the number of federal programs than this. If this trend continues, the states may be left hollow shells, operating primarily as field districts of federal departments and dependent upon the federal treasury for their support. It has been truly said by our former chief executive, Dwight D. Eisenhower, that the federal government did not create the states of this republic. The states created the federal government. If the states lose their meaning, our entire system of government loses its meaning. And the next step is the rise of the centralized national state, in which the seeds of autocracy can take root and grow, unquote. Those are strong but true words. The history of all mankind shows very clearly that if we would be free, and if we would stay free, we must stand eternal watch against the accumulation of too much power in government. There is hardly a single instance in all of history where the dictatorial centralization of power has been compatible with individual freedom, for it has not reduced the citizenry to the status of pawns and mere creatures of the state. God forbid that this should ever happen in America. Yet I am persuaded that the continuation of the trend of the past 30 years could make us pallbearers at the burial of the states as effective units of government. Now, the drift towards centralization of power is not inevitable. It can be slowed down, halted, reversed. How? By state and local governments insisting that local and state problems, by state and local governments insisting that theirs is the responsibility for problems that are essentially local and state problems. Insisting upon this with the knowledge that responsibility and authority go hand in hand. Inevitably, in centralized federal programs, the money is not wisely spent, at least not as wisely spent as if the states participated financially. The people come to look to the federal government as the provider, at no cost to them, of whatever is needful. The truth is that the federal government has no funds, which it does not first in some manner take from the people. A dollar cannot make the round trip from Boston to Washington and back without shrinking in the process. As taxpayers, we need to recognize these facts. Programs which obscure them are contrary to the public interest. The thought that the federal government is wealthy and the states poverty-stricken is a dangerous illusion. The federal debt in the United States is now 16 times as great as the combined debt of the 50 states. It is difficult for the states to make a strong case for assistance from the federal government when anything the federal government spends must come from the states. The states not only have rights, they also have responsibilities and they have opportunities. In the last analysis, we are not trying to protect one government entity from another. We are trying to protect the rights of individual people. If we ever forget this, the whole process of government is pointless. George Washington said, "Government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master." It is hardly lack of due process, said the Supreme Court, for the government to regulate that which it subsidizes. But we must remember that a planned and subsidized economy weakens initiative, discourages industry, destroys character, and demoralizes the people. Our people must remain free. Our economy must remain free, free of excessive governmental paternalism, regimentation, and control. As a nation, we are strong. With the freedom of economic enterprise that we possess, we are able to produce as much industrial goods as all the rest of the world combined. Even though we are only about 6% of the world's people and possess only about 6% of the world's land. This is nothing short of a miracle. These abundant blessings have come to us through an economic system which rests largely on three pillars, and I've mentioned these many times. First, free enterprise, the right to venture, the right to choose. Second, private property, the right to own. And third, a market economy, the right to exchange. All of these basic pillars are absent in communist Russia. They're all absent under communism. Working together, we can maintain the strength of these three pillars. There are some in the United States, nevertheless, who decry free enterprise, who would place business, agriculture, and labor in a government straitjacket. Our economic order, of course, is not perfect because it is operated by imperfect human beings. But it has given us more of the good things of life than any other system in operation in this world. The fundamental reason is that our economy is free. It must remain free. In that freedom ultimately lies our basic economic strength. Let us admit the weaknesses that exist. Let us work aggressively to correct them. But never let us make the catastrophic blunder of putting chains on our basic economic freedom. Yes, our fundamental material advances have been the fruit of our freedom, our free enterprise system, our American way of life, our God-given freedom of choice. The progress of the future must stem from this same basic freedom. Yet these basic American beliefs, principles, and attitudes are threatened today as never before. By whom are they threatened? These basic concepts are threatened by three groups. First, they are threatened by well-meaning but uninformed people who see the shortcomings of our economic system and believe they can legislate them out of existence. They try to reach the promised land by passing laws. They do not understand our economic system and its limitations. They would load it down with burdens it was never intended to carry. As their schemes begin to break down, more and more controls must be supplied. We have evidence of it in agriculture. Patch is placed upon patch. Regulation is added to regulation. And ultimately, by degrees, freedom is lost. Without our desiring to lose it, and without our knowing why or how it was lost. Second, our heritage of freedom is threatened by another group. Self-seeking men who see in government legislation a way to obtain special privilege for themselves or to restrain their competitors. They use demagoguery as a smoke screen to deceive. These people have no love for freedom or enterprise. They would bargain away their birthright for a mess of pottage. They would learn the value of freedom only after it was gone. Third, a third, still much smaller group is dedicated to the overthrow of the economic and social system that is our tradition. Their philosophy does not stem from Jefferson, but is foreign to our shores. It is a total philosophy of life, atheistic and utterly opposed to all that we hold dear as a great Christian nation. These men understand our system thoroughly, and they hate it thoroughly. They enlist innocent but willing followers from the uninformed and the unprincipled. Through rabble-rousing and demagoguery, they play upon the economic reverses and hardships of the unsuspecting. They promise the impossible. They call black white and mislead with fallacies masqueraded as truth. Now, if we lose our freedom, it will be to this strange and unlike coalition of the well-intentioned, the slothful, and the subversives. It will be because we did not care enough, because we were not alert enough, because we were too apathetic to take note while the precious waters of our God-given freedom slipped drop by drop down the drain. Heaven forbid that this should ever come to pass. Let us remember that we are a prosperous people today because of a free enterprise system founded on spiritual, not material values alone. It is founded on freedom of choice, free agency, and eternal God-given principle. The founding fathers, inspired though they were, did not invent the priceless blessing of individual freedom and respect for the dignity of man. No, that priceless gift to mankind sprang from the God of heaven and not from government. Yes, the founding fathers welded together the safeguards as best they could, but freedom must be continually won to be enjoyed. We must never forget these facts. This is America, the land of opportunity, a land choice above all other lands. God grant we may keep it so. We here in this choice land, as Theodore Roosevelt said a half-century ago, hold in our hands the hope of the world, the fate of the coming years, and shame and disgrace will be ours if in our eyes the light of high resolve is dimmed, if we trail in the dust the golden hopes of men. With God's help, the light of high resolve in the eyes of the American people must never be dimmed. Our freedom must and will be preserved. My own political and economic creed is a simple one. I commend it to you. I am for freedom and against slavery in any form. I am for social progress and against socialism. I am for a dynamic economy and against waste. I am for the private competitive market and against unnecessary governmental intervention. I am for private ownership and against governmental ownership and control of the means of production and distribution. I am for national security and against appeasement and capitulation to an obvious enemy. May I comment briefly on that last item? Just a short time ago, Fidel Castro broadcast to the world his boastful confession that he had been a hardcore communist all his adult life. He gloried in the fact that he had been able to confuse and deceive many people simply by saying he was not a communist. And because there were people in this and other countries who believed his false assertions, he was able to establish a Soviet beachhead only 90 miles from our shores. Americans must face the cold, hard fact that Fidel Castro was encouraged and supported in his seizure of Cuba. Why? Simply because many Americans were led to believe the falsehood that he would resist Soviet influence and restore the basic freedom of the Cuban people. And these people love freedom. I've been among them. A few of us issued early warnings based on unimpeachable evidence. 2 United States ambassadors at least repeatedly warned that Castro was part of the communist camp, that he was working for the communist conquest of Cuba. These voices went unheeded. This is merely a repetition of the same deceitful pattern which was used after World War II to have us tolerate revolutionary communists in China, to accept them as so-called agrarian reformers, and allow them to seize and enslave some 450 million people on the Chinese mainland. This is the same deceitful pattern which we have been asked to accept in the Congo, in Laos, in British Guiana, and so on. In fact, everywhere, the communist conspiratorial machinery is preparing for a seizure of power. We are assured there is no immediate danger from communism. We are told that the high political officials in these countries who surround themselves with known communist advisors are merely trying to reconcile the various political factions and make their governments more representative. Later, after each country is taken over by the Fidel Castros, we are then assured that these men betrayed the revolution. Research subsequently reveals that these men had been hardcore communists for many years. Those who believed them once more lament, I wonder how they deceived us. To me, the important question is, are we going to let them deceive us any longer? To the true communist, nothing is evil if it is expedient. Being without conscience or honor, he feels completely justified in using whatever means are necessary to achieve his goal. Force, trickery, lies, broken promises, mayhem, and individual and mass murder. Let us have no illusions about them. Their leader has told us bluntly, their purpose is not alone to enslave us, they want to bury us. What we face today is not just a Cold War, not just a struggle for the control of land, sea, and air, and even outer space. but total competition for the control of men's minds. Unless we meet it and defeat it, we shall almost inevitably one day face the loss of all that we hold dear. In less than half a century, this evil system has gained control over 1/3 of mankind, and it is steadily pursuing its vicious goal of control over all the rest of the world. Since World War II, I am told that people have been brought under the communist yoke at the rate of 6,000 per hour, 144,000 per year, or per day, and 52 million per year. Latin America does not believe that suppression is the road to freedom. Less than 15 years ago, communism was not a powerful force in Latin America. Today it is not only strongly present there as an enemy to be reckoned with, it is openly allied with a government located on an island only 90 miles from Key West, Florida. The only political party now functioning in Cuba is the Popular Socialist Party, the Communist Party under another name. Cuba is being used today as a funnel through which communists are infiltrating other American republics. We are dealing with a cunning opponent in Premier Khrushchev. He is a master of deceit. It is possible that it is he who won in Cuba recently. Yes, it is possible that Premier Khrushchev has taken a tactical one step backward by promising to remove Cuban missiles, but that this has been followed by the prescribed 2 steps forward when he obtained the promise of the President of the United States that the blockade would be removed, and most important, that no one would invade Cuba, the Cuban islands, provided Russian missile bases were withdrawn. And now in our latest move, we pay $53 million in goods, plus $2.9 million in cash as tribute and ransom to a lying, godless, communist dictator. Time magazine last week had this to say: in a humanitarian sense, the return of the prisoners could be only a cause for rejoicing. As for President Kennedy, he feels a moral obligation to the prisoners. He made the decision that sent them to the Bay of Pigs. He also denied them the air cover that might have given them a chance. But there remained even more basic problems of principle. Should the United States pay ransom to sustain Castro's communist regime? End of quotation. Why do we, the greatest power in all the world, pay tribute to an unprincipled tyrant on an island 90 miles away? Why do we bow and scrape to a blustering, godless murderer who heads up a freedom-destroying slave system that is in deep trouble everywhere? Why, I ask. The December 24th issue of the United States News and World Report states, behind the latest shakeup in the communist economic system is a story of failure. Instead of the high prosperity that communist bosses keep promising, there is depression all through the Red Empire. Russia is in trouble. So is all Eastern Europe. Red China and Cuba are a shambles, unquote. Barron's Weekly for December 24th, 1962 leads with an article captioned, "Bankrupt Socialism. State planning the Kremlin has confessed is a failure," and adds, in a speech that must have rocked the Kremlin to its foundations, Premier Nikita Khrushchev last month publicly confessed that the Soviet system doesn't work very well. What the USSR needs, he added, is less planning and more enterprise. We should remember Lenin's injunction to be able, if necessary, to learn from the capitalists, to imitate whatever they have that is good and profitable. And so, if they're going to achieve any of their plans economically, they're going to have to move in the direction of free enterprise. Why do we try to move in the opposite direction? The article continues, it constitutes a wonderful rebuff to all those who, one way or another, are seeking to foist collectivism upon the world. Unquote. And now, close at home, after the ransom and tribute deal, what next for Castro and Cuba? As Americans, will we still go gullibly on our complacent way seeking to escape from reality? Last Wednesday, January 2nd, Castro, in a 92-minute speech, called our president a vulgar pirate chief and gloated over the fact that for the first time in history, imperialism, meaning the United States, has paid war indemnification. The president said to the Cuban freedom fighters, it is the strongest wish of the people of this country, as well as the people of this hemisphere, that Cuba shall one day be free again. All true Americans share the president's wish, but it will take much more than wishes to achieve this freedom. It appears that legally and diplomatically, Cuba has been abandoned to communism, and all of Latin America threatened with this insidious evil. Now, in conclusion, with our national prestige at or near an all-time low, when will we act like men of courage? Why this continuing policy of softness toward communism? When will we begin to take positions based on what is right and then stand firm? The language and action of firmness will be respected and is the only safe course for our great nation to pursue. True to communist and dictator tradition, the Cuban government has deprived its people of the rights of a free press, free elections, and the protection of other fundamental human rights. How did this situation come about? How has it been possible for this completely warped philosophy in such a short time to reach its present influence in the world? How is it possible for communism to be here and now moving into Africa, pressing upon all of Asia, threatening the Middle East, and increasingly becoming a danger in the Western Hemisphere? There are, of course, many reasons. Some nations have failed to provide for the advancement and desperate needs of their people, physical needs. Others have failed to recognize the worth of the individual. But is it not perhaps true that the biggest reason of all is the failure of Western civilization to live up to its Judeo-Christian ideals? I believe J. Edgar Hoover and the investigating committees of Congress know whereof they speak when they warn us of a serious internal threat to the American way of life. I hear that some people, and more particularly the communists and the so-called social democrats, don't want us to examine the internal threat. But I believe we should. I think we should study communism and study socialism so we can recognize the influence of each. We can leave the spies to the FBI, but learning how our enemies are trying to subvert us is everybody's job. I also recognize that it is not popular in some circles to be called an anti-communist. but I consider communism a political and economic disease. I do not believe an American citizen can be patriotic and loyal to his own country and its God-inspired Constitution of freedom without being anti-communist. Now, I know that Moscow has ordered that all anti-communists are to be attacked and discredited in every way possible. I know the Communist Party of the United States has issued a similar mandate. This does not disturb me at all. It should be expected. Meanwhile, we should pursue a calm and steady course, fearlessly. We should expose to the light of public inquiry those forces which would destroy our country and our way of life. We should pay no attention to the recommendations of men who call the Constitution an 18th century agrarian document, who apologize for capitalism and free enterprise. We should refuse to follow their siren song of concentrating increasingly the powers of government in the chief executive, of delegating American sovereign authority to non-American institutions in the United Nations, and pretending that it will bring peace to the world by turning our armed forces over to a United Nations worldwide police force. Today, as never before, says J. Edgar Hoover, America has need for men and women who possess the moral strength and courage of our forefathers, modern-day patriots, with pride in our country and faith in freedom, unafraid to declare to anyone, anywhere in the world, I believe in liberty. I believe in justice. I will fight, if need be, to defend the dignity of man. Too often in recent years, patriotic symbols have been shunted aside. Our national heroes have been maligned, our history distorted. Has it become a disgrace to pledge allegiance to our flag, or to sign a loyalty oath, or pay tribute to our national anthem? Is it shameful to encourage our children to memorize the stirring words of the men of '76? Is it becoming appropriate to state "In God we trust" when proclaiming our love of country? What we desperately need today is patriotism founded on a real understanding of the American ideal, a dedicated belief in our principles of freedom, and a determination to perpetuate America's heritage. Let us live our lives so that we may proclaim to the whole world, individual freedom is our creed, national freedom is our heritage, and world freedom is our goal. This contest in which we are engaged is as old as man and as young as hope. This issue is over the God-given eternal principle of freedom, free agency, the right of choice. In this struggle, it is not enough to be right. We must put strength and action back of that which is right. In the conflict with socialistic communism, we must have patience, courage, and wisdom. We must also have friends. Russia has hostages. We have friends. Millions of them in temporary slavery back of the Iron Curtain, and millions more to be mobilized throughout the free world. In Russia, people are unable to challenge the despotic, godless dogmas forced on the people. We must take greater risks for freedom. We must dramatize American might and Soviet myth. Yes, this is a choice land, choice above all others, blessed by the Almighty, Our forebears have made and kept it so. It will continue to be a land of freedom and liberty as long as we are able to advance in the light of sound and enduring principles of right. To sacrifice such principles for momentary expediency, often selfishly motivated, is to endanger our noble heritage and is unworthy of this great American people. With all my heart, I love this great nation. I have lived and traveled abroad just enough to make me appreciate rather fully what we have here. To me, this is not just another nation. This is not just one of the family of nations. This is a nation with a great mission to perform for liberty-loving people everywhere. It is my firm conviction that the Constitution of this land was established by men whom the God of heaven raised up unto this very purpose. This is part of my religious faith. The days ahead are sobering and challenging, and will demand the faith, prayers, and loyalty of every American. May God give us the wisdom to recognize the threat to our freedom and the strength to meet this danger courageously. Our challenge is to keep America strong and free, strong socially, strong economically, and above all, strong spiritually, if our way of life is to endure. There is no other way. Only in this course is there safety for our nation. God grant we may resolutely follow this course in humility and faith. I humbly pray. Thank you very much.